In 2005, scientists noticed a concerning trend. The widespread use of social media and the proliferation of cringe-worthy TikTok appeared to be negatively impacting people's attention spans and cognitive abilities, resulting in a decline in IQ scores. Meanwhile, the US military embarked on an ambitious experiment involving hibernation pods. Their aim was to place highly trained soldiers and pilots in a state of deep sleep, so that they could be awakened only when necessary, thus avoiding excessive expenses on training new personnel. Among those chosen for this experiment were Joe, an average soldier from the army, and Rita, a prostitute. The experiment involved putting both of them in the hibernation pod for a year, and in return, they would receive a substantial amount of money. Due to the highly secretive nature of this experiment, nobody in the world had any knowledge about it. The experiment commences as Joe and Rita are placed inside the hibernation pod. However, a few days later, the head of the experiment, General Colin, is arrested for operating an illegal brothel. Consequently, the facility housing the experiment is demolished, and gradually, their pods end up discarded in a dumpster. As time elapses, in line with the scientists' predictions, people's IQ levels continue to plummet, rendering everyone exceedingly foolish. Humanity finds itself incapable of solving even the most basic problems. There had been hopes that the scientists would address this issue, but they were more interested in working on cure for baldness and small pp. Along with the decline in human intelligence, cleanliness and hygiene vanish from the world, resulting in huge mountains of garbage formed across the globe. Approximately 500 years later, a colossal garbage mountain collapses, causing a flood of trash in the city. In the midst of this chaos, Joe's hibernation pod ends up inside the house of a man named Frito. However, Frito is so lazy that he doesn't even care that a whole heap of garbage has broken through his walls and entered his house. He spends his entire day sitting and watching TV, eating junk food. He is so lazy that he even had a toilet installed in his chair so that he wouldn't have to get up and go to the bathroom. In an unexpected turn of events, Joe's pod opens, and he emerges, attempting to talk to Frito, but Frito without a second thought picks up Joe and hurls him outside. Joe finds himself utterly bewildered by the profound transformation unfolding around him. He struggles to comprehend how everything has undergone such drastic change within the span of a single year. Even the way people communicate with each other has undergone a complete transformation, and everyone talks like an NPC. When Joe attempts to talk to the people, they laugh at his way of speaking, calling him a fad. Joe begins to suspect that the year he spent in the hibernation pod is causing hallucinations, prompting him to decide to seek medical help at a hospital. However, he discovers that everyone in the hospital is engaged in playing video games, as the hospital only provides free treatment to winners of the game. Confused by all this, Joe inquires with the receptionist about seeing a doctor, and the receptionist promptly presses a button on the table, scheduling an appointment for him. Joe, feeling thirsty, decides to quench his thirst and approaches a nearby faucet to drink water. However, to his surprise, instead of water, a green-colored liquid emerges from the tap. Perplexed, he turns to a man standing nearby and inquires him about it. The man, taken aback, bursts into laughter before walking away. In reality, people in future only use water in toilets, and the entire world drinks an energy drink called Brondo instead. Afterward, Joe meets the doctor, who seems more like an NPC than an actual physician. Following their conversation, the doctor declares Joe insane and asks him to be hospitalized, demanding a fee of $5 billion. Now Joe understands why people were playing games outside. After some time, Joe's gaze falls upon a magazine with a date of 2505 written on it, completely astonishing him. He looks out of the window and realizes that he has traveled 500 years into the future. In this future, everyone has a tattoo on their hand that contains all their personal information, which can be scanned for retrieval. When the doctor asks Joe to scan his hand for the tattoo, a sense of fear takes hold of the doctor as he sees that Joe's hand is devoid of any such marking. In a state of panic, the doctor immediately calls the police. Joe swiftly escapes from the hospital, and as he takes in his surroundings, he becomes utterly convinced that he has truly arrived in the future. The country has undergone a complete transformation, the economy is in decline, there is filth everywhere, and the nation's highest grossing film is called Ass, which primarily showed a person's buttocks for 90 minutes, sometimes it even farts. Joe spends the entire day exploring this unfamiliar future. However, as night falls, a nearby machine scans his hand, leading to his arrest by the police due to his lack of a tattoo. Joe is brought to court, where a lawyer is assigned to represent him. Unfortunately, it turns out to be Frito, the same person whose house Joe's pod accidentally entered. In the courtroom, Joe finds himself facing two major charges: failure to pay the hospital bill and the absence of a tattoo on his hand. Surprisingly, instead of defending Joe, his lawyer Frito testifies against him, claiming that this individual also destroyed his house and deserves punishment. Despite Joe's attempts to explain that he accidentally traveled 500 years into the future, his words are met with laughter from the entire court. Regrettably, the judge ultimately declares Joe guilty. Before being taken to jail, Joe is brought to a machine capable of applying tattoos, ensuring he has one on his hand. When prompted for his name, Joe unintentionally responds with "not sure," resulting in the machine inscribing "not sure" as his name. Following this, Joe undergoes an IQ test, designed to determine the type of work he will be assigned within the confines of the jail, based on his intelligence. In this absurd world, the IQ test proves to be child's play for Joe, as he effortlessly passes all the assessments. Joe comes to the realization that he is the most intelligent person amidst the sea of fools surrounding him. With this newfound awareness, upon reaching the jail, he confidently informs the guard that today is his scheduled release day. Astonishingly, the foolish guards allow him to leave without any further inquiry. Unbeknownst to Joe, his escape is captured on the CCTV cameras as he exits the jail. On the other hand, we have Rita, who also emerges from her hibernation pod. Upon awakening, she resumes her profession as a prostitute, only to realize that the individuals around her are exceedingly gullible. Taking advantage of their foolishness, Rita charges them money and asks to come after 2 days for service. Surprisingly, they agree without hesitation, allowing Rita to earn money without actually having to engage in any work herself. Meanwhile, Joe successfully evades the police and makes his way to Frito's house, as he has no desire to remain in this world any longer. There, he seeks Frito's assistance in locating a time machine, believing that humanity must have invented one in the past 500 years. However, Frito informs Joe that there is an exhibit called the Time Machine in a museum but outright refuses to provide any help or support to Joe. Joe uses his wit to trick Frito into thinking that if Frito guides him to the time machine, Joe will open a bank account in Frito's name in the past and deposit a staggering $10 billion. Joe assures Frito that over the course of 500 years, the value of that money will increase to a whopping $80 billion, allowing Frito to live a life of luxury. While engrossed in this discussion, the police unexpectedly arrive at the door, prompting Joe and Frito to swiftly escape through the window. Along the way, they come across Rita and take her along with them. While riding in the car, Joe forgets to hide his tattoo, which is subsequently scanned by a machine outside, alerting the police to their location. Fortunately, before the police arrive, they abandon their car and make a daring escape. In this future world, the police didn't rely much on negotiation, and without any dialogue they ruthlessly set their car on fire. Afterward, Frito leads Joe and Rita to the largest trade center in the future, from where they were supposed to take a metro to reach the museum. However, as they prepare to board the metro, Rita heads to the bathroom. In that moment, the nearby machine once again scans Joe's tattoo, triggering a rapid response from the police. They swiftly arrive at the scene and apprehend Joe, but this time instead of taking him to jail, they escort him directly to the White House. There, Joe meets President Camacho, who is a 5-time SmackDown champion and a former porn star. Acting upon the president's orders, Joe is appointed as the Secretary of the Interior due to his exceptional IQ, which is the highest in this world. The president announces to the public that Joe will now be responsible for resolving the food shortage in the country. If he succeeds, his sentence will be pardoned, but failure would result in a death sentence. Afterwards, Joe takes part in a meeting alongside the other secretaries. He impresses everyone by delivering a speech filled with elaborate vocabulary and complex terminology, successfully convincing them of his intellect. However, Joe's true motivation lies in locating his time machine rather than addressing the food shortage issue at hand. While in the farm, Frito approaches Joe and hands him a map intended to assist him in his quest to find the time machine. However, to Joe's disappointment, the map Frito provided is nothing more than a poorly drawn line. As Joe explores the farm, he discovers that people were using the same energy drink they consumed instead of water for irrigation and nurturing their crops. Joe proposes to the government that they should use water for irrigation instead of the energy drink, presenting logical arguments. However, all the secretaries burst into laughter, mocking Joe by questioning why crops don't grow inside toilets if water can make them grow. Left with no other option, Joe lies, claiming that he can actually communicate with plants, and the plants themselves have expressed their dislike for the energy drink and their preference for water. Surprisingly, everyone starts believing Joe's words and decides to switch to water for irrigation. However, as a result of this change, the shares of the energy drink company begin to decline, leading to a rapid increase in unemployment and widespread protests outside the White House. The secretaries hold Joe accountable for this situation, and he is thrown back into jail. As part of his punishment, Joe is placed inside a small barely functional car, destined to engage in a life or death battle against a formidable truck within a stadium. Days pass, and the fateful day of Joe's punishment finally arrives. Positioned in the small car, he finds himself facing a colossal truck. Drawing upon his intelligence, Joe skillfully maneuvers the car, causing a collision between the two vehicles, resulting in a fiery explosion. However, amidst the match, a figure named Beef Supreme emerges before Joe, armed with a menacing flamethrower and seemingly determined to end Joe's life. On the other hand, we witness Rita, who is deeply concerned about Joe. Suddenly, her eyes catch sight of a rose outside the window, serving as an indication that Joe's plan has succeeded. Reacting swiftly, she rushes to the stadium and bribes the cameraman to hand the camera to Frito, enabling him to record Joe's successful crop growth. Rita then heads to the control room, where she broadcasts the live footage of Joe's prosperous crops on every television screen, leaving everyone astonished. President Camacho promptly intervenes, rescuing Joe from beef supreme and publicly forgiving his punishment in front of the entire audience. During the party at the White House held in celebration of the successful crop growth, Rita confesses to Joe that she doesn't want to return to her own time. Despite the foolishness of the people in the future, she believes that their hearts are pure. Joe respects Rita's decision and decides to go back alone using the time machine. However, upon reaching the supposed location of the time machine, he discovers that the time machine Frito had mentioned was merely an amusement ride. In the following years, Joe becomes the President of the United States and advocates passionately for the importance of books and education in improving the state of the country. He enters into marriage with Rita, and together they have 3 children who turn out to be the most intelligent kids in the world. In contrast, Frito evolves into a wise president, and has 8 wives and 32 children who unfortunately grow up to be the most foolish kids in the entire world. And with this scene, movie comes to an end. If you like the explanation, please subscribe the channel. See you in the next video. Till then, take care and goodbye.